Call to order the executive committee meeting here for November 7th, 2024. Could we have a roll call, please?
Tony O'Brien.
Aye.
Michael Payne.
Here.
Keith Smith.
Here.
Staff present, David Blunt.
Here.
Laura Greene here. Christine Jacobs. And guest David Foley.
Here. All right, next is the consent agenda. Any questions? Anything that needs to be pulled? No? All right, do we have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Second. All right, motion made by Mr. Smith and seconded by Mr. Payne. All those in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion passes unanimously. All right, so next, Ms. Greene and Mr. Foley and everybody else. Draft financial audit report.
Want me to kick you off? David came on site on September 30th, that week. I was here for 5 days, collected the site information necessary to do the reporting and evaluation of the financials. So this is what he returned. We're here to discuss his findings.
All right.
That's good.
Well, thank you. Thank you all for having me here. As Laura said, we completed the audit and have issued a draft of the audited financial statements, and which we'll go through with a fine-tooth comb. But included in the audited financial report are 3 different reports from us that communicate the results of the audit. And so as part of the audit that we do, there's really 3 main pieces of that audit. One, of course, is we audit the financial statements to make sure that they're prepared in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. And then the other 2 pieces of the audit we do in accordance with government auditing standards. So one is we gain an understanding and review the internal controls that the commission has in place over its financial reporting. We do this to design our audit test accordingly. And then the third piece of the audit is the federal compliance piece in accordance with the uniform guidance. So anytime an organization expends over $750,000 in federal grant funds, you have to have a single audit as part of the financial statement audit. So as when we're out doing the audit, OMB provides a compliance supplement with a list of all the various compliance requirements that the commission has to comply with when it's expending its federal grant program. So as part of the audit for the major federal grant programs, we go through those compliance requirements to make sure that the commission is complying with those requirements. So included in the audited financial statements, there are again 3 different reports from us. The first is on numbered page 6 of the report, and this is our independent auditor's report. So in this report, we state, we did perform an audit of the commission's financial statements. And then the second paragraph of this report is where we issue our opinion on the financial statements. And we have issued an unmodified opinion on the commission's financial statements, which an unmodified opinion is the cleanest opinion an auditor can give on the set of financial statements. Basically, an unmodified opinion means that the commission's financial statements have been prepared in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. So the opinion is clean. The other 2 reports from us are way in the back of the report, starting on page 70. The first report back here is our report on the internal controls over financial reporting. This report is clean as well. We noted no significant deficiencies or material weaknesses in the commission's internal controls over its financial reporting. For example, when we came to do the audit, we had no proposed audit adjustments. Which I think speaks to the internal controls that the commission has in place and the strength of the finance team, you know, to go through an audit and not have any proposed audit adjustments is not very common. Usually, you know, we find a few things here and there. So the fact that we did not have any, again, I think speaks to the strength of the controls and finance folks. And then the third and final report from us is 2 pages over on page 72. This is our report for the federal compliance report. Again, this report was clean as well. We noted no significant deficiencies or material weaknesses in the commission's compliance with its major federal grant programs. Also, no items of non-compliance were noted as part of the audit. So very, very clean audit for the commission again this year. So going back towards the front of the report, so those are the 3 reports from us. So going back to the front of the report on page 9 starts the next section of the report. So this, starting on page 9, is the management's discussion and analysis. So this document is written and prepared by management. It's more of a narrative overview of the year. A lot of financial highlights in here. There's various tables, like page 9 is a summary table of the general fund revenues and expenditures, and it's also comparative, so you can see how this year compared to last. Couple other tables in here, more just summarized financial information, and some, you know, again, more narrative analysis on how the year went. I don't know if there's anything in particular y'all wanted me to highlight in the MD&A, or
if answer any questions, if anyone has any questions on anything in the MD&A report. I think I had just a quick note that we wanted to say that the general fund increased its balance by $463,786 in this fiscal year. And
That cost rate.
yes, I mentioned indirect cost rate. The indirect cost rate is a calculation of indirect cost divided by total staff salary and fringe that's applied to projects. That calculated rate for this 24 fiscal year was 41%, and last year's rate was 56.
And the year before that was 74.
74. So we are on a
Good trend.
trend downward.
I think it's important to note, though, with in a year where we had 74% indirect cost rate, we're bringing in more revenue than our actual administrative expenses were for that year. What we need to look at is, with a 41% rate, there is the risk that our administrative expenses will be more than that, and we won't be bringing in enough, which just means we would need a reserve transfer to capture some of the gains from the previous year. With that rate changing year over year, you're never really striking a 1-to-1 balance. You're 2 years lagging behind. So the 24 sets the 26 rates. And so there's a variable, ebb and flow to that. So while there's a huge net gain, I reserve the opinion that there's also potentially the need to dip into that net gain in order to cover some basic administrative expenses.
And I have done a deep dive into the numbers as to the justification of why it has dipped so low. It is low for the agency in general. And a lot of what contributes to that, the direct costs were higher as opposed to being lower, even though we did lose some direct staff. And that's partially because the staff that needed to go to those program costs were higher level staff, so their rates were higher, so the cost on direct programs were higher as compared to last year, as well as the indirect costs were lower. And the bulk of that is once you move time over to direct costs, you automatically take it out of administrative costs, indirect costs. So there's a skew there. So the analysis was that we had a decrease in expenditures in fiscal year 24 of 92,696 over fiscal year 23. And for income, we had a increase of direct cost by $101,021. So that makes it quite a gap from where we were.
And in layman's terms, that means Ruth and I and Laura and David are billing to programs in order to fill those vacancies. So billing to the MPO, billing to rural transportation. And in effect, we're then not billing our time to administrative tasks.
So, as an example, Christine was 14% more than budgeted to programs. Ruth was 8% more, Gretchen was 6% more, and I billed 5% program, which I don't think Dawn had in the past.
And that's directly related to the lack of having the qualified staff.
That is directly related to the, yes.
And staff also, other staff not accounted for here were also taken away from administrative time to do more program time if they were delegated those tasks to fill in.
But we're currently great because we only have one empty, which is a big one, which is,
Director of Transportation. And we are filling two. Well, I guess Keith, to answer your question, we have two vacancies, but it's because we moved the body program admin into planning, and so we're now doing. So we didn't lose a person; we just freed up a position to bring somebody else in.
And mobility management.
And mobility management will be a new staff member coming here that we're pulling. We were contracting out to Java, but we're going to take that in house.
And what are we looking for next year? Rate for next year, you think?
I'm sorry?
What do you think the indirect rate's gonna be going forward?
I have not looked that forward yet.
Hopefully a little less.
But if anyone does have any questions as they read through the MD&A, I am happy to answer more questions.
Thank you. All right, so the financial statements start on page 17. And so the first two exhibits here are the full accrual statements. So you have on the financial statements, you have capital assets, any long-term liabilities, and then all the pension related information. So exhibit 1 is a statement of net position. So this shows the total assets, deferred outflows, liabilities, deferred inflows, and net position at the end of the fiscal year. So on exhibit 1, total assets and deferred outflows were a little over 9 million at the end of the fiscal year, compared to total liabilities and deferred inflows a little over 7 million. So then at net position ended the year at a little over 2 million. And then that net position is further broken down between what's invested, the net investment in capital assets, restricted net position, which is the commission's pension plan actually has a net pension asset. So that's restricted for the pension, and then unrestricted was 1.3 at the end of the fiscal year. And then the next page is a statement of activities. Again, this is on the full accrual basis. So this shows the expenses and program revenues, and then the general revenues, and about 3/4 of the way down the page, you can see the net increase in that position. So net position increased by 652,000 during the fiscal year. So again, those are the full accrual statements. If we flip over 2 pages to page 20, this starts the fund statements. These are on the modified accrual basis, so you don't have things like depreciation expense, all that fund pension information, and no long-term debt, which the only long-term obligations that the commission has is the accrued leave and also the lease liability. So exhibit 3 is the balance sheet. Again, this shows the assets, liabilities, and fund balance at the end of the fiscal year. And then there's various columns for the different funds. So general fund, which is the main operating fund. Then we've got the transportation, home. Then there's the column for the Blue Ridge Cigarette Tax Board, and then broadband, and then other governmental funds. So total assets, 8.5 million at the end of the fiscal year, compared to total liabilities of 6.9. And then the ending fund balance for the fiscal year was 1,523,000. And then that fund balance again is further broken down between non-spendable, which is just your prepaid items, committed, which is the capital reserve, and then unassigned. Unassigned fund balance is 652,000 at the end of the year. The next exhibit 4, this is just a reconciliation. So this just shows you how you get from the ending fund balance of 1.5 million to the ending net position that you saw on exhibit 1. So again, things like capital assets, all the pension information, and then any long-term obligations. The next exhibit is exhibit 5 on page 22. This is a statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance. Again, we got various columns for the different funds. And then this shows total revenues, total expenses, and then change in fund balance. So total revenues, 36.6 million, which of course most of that is the 30.1 million is related to the broadband. And then expenses of 36.1. And then again, you can see down towards the bottom, the net change in fund balance. So the commission's fund balance increased by almost 464,000 during the fiscal year. So healthy increase. The next exhibit again is just one of reconciliation exhibit. This just shows how you get from that net change in fund balance that we just looked at on exhibit 5 to the net change in net position that we saw on exhibit 2. And then the next section of the report is the notes to the financial statements. So the notes to the financial statements, they start on page 25. So the notes to the financial statements discloses significant accounting policies that the commission uses to prepare its financial statements. It also can provide some more detailed information behind some of the information in the financial statements. For example, on page 35, that just shows a detail of the capital assets that the commission has. And then if you wanted to know anything about BRS or group life insurance, that starts on page 38 and goes on for probably 15 pages. So anything you want to know about the VRS program, you don't need to go on their website. You can just read this, read your financial report.
As long as we're not being tested on it,
Right.
good.
Yeah. Just one other note, I'll point out is on, there's the indirect costs. That's in between the two pension notes on page 46. There's a note on the indirect cost. So again, here the note shows the indirect cost rate that was used during the fiscal year. So 74% was used for the billing during the fiscal year. And then down below that shows what the actual indirect cost was for FY24 of the 41%, which again will take effect in FY26. So then after the notes to the financial statements, a few more schedules and exhibits in here on page 55. This is the budget actual exhibit numbers on exhibit 7. So again, this shows columns for the original budget, the final budget, the actual numbers, and then the variance. So you can see how actual compared to what was budgeted.
So, I guess it sort of jumps out that we budgeted $54 million in revenues, but actually did $28 million. I'm sorry, 36 million, right?
Yeah, our original budget, the one where we project in the
Oh,
fall,
and
a
then
year in
final
advance.
budget.
is 54.
Yeah.
Final budget's 28 and we did 36.
Yeah.
And the big one was the HUD, right?
Now, the big one is body.
Body.
Yeah,
Body.
the
Yeah,
big
the
one is
broadband.
body through the HCD.
Oh, but yeah, DHCD is where they're buried, Department of Housing and Community Development.
And that's just based on the progress of the infrastructure project and, you know, how much pass through we get from the 13 participating localities and the
But
federal
home's
funding.
also in that number.
And that's more sort of timing as to.
HUD
when
is,
things happen.
home is in HUD,
Sorry,
not
I
DHCD.
missed it.
Yep. That's fine.
Was it more timing between the original and the final budget in terms of when we thought the revenues would come in, et cetera?
Yeah, I was projecting out a 3-year grant and trying to say what's gonna happen in the next 3 months versus 9 months versus 12 months. And that is a constantly moving target. You know, that's something we do our best. We work with, you know, Firefly partners to try to project that.
Particularly with that project, yeah, it's hard, hard to, at the beginning of the time to say, well, in 12 months or 18 months later, this is where we're gonna be, because so many factors influence the progress.
Is that the same thing with the EPA? Same concept? For 27 grand in the hole?
That one, we actually moved quicker on that project than we anticipated. Yep.
Thanks for explaining that $8 million negative.
So the next 6 exhibits are related to the pension and OPEB program, so we can kind of skip over those. So the next meaningful exhibit schedules over a few pages on page 65. This is schedule 1. This is a schedule of expenditures for the general fund. So just details out the expenditures that were included in the general fund that you saw previously on exhibit 5.
So in the MD&A report, it does tell you which program codes, because this is not just administrative codes here. It includes some other vocabulary funding and things. So that will delineate what's considered a general fund as opposed to other governmental funds, also delineated in the MD&A report.
So the next 2 schedules are related to the calculated indirect cost. So or the indirect cost rate. So schedule 2 on page 66, this is a schedule of indirect costs for the year. So this is basically the numerator in the indirect cost calculation. And then the next page over, page 67, this is exhibit or schedule 3. That's a schedule of the program personnel costs. So this is basically the denominator of the calculation. And then down at the bottom of schedule 3, it shows how the indirect cost is calculated. So taking your indirect cost of 411,000 divided by $1 million in program personnel cost, and that's how you get your 41% indirect cost rate. So these schedules just support how that is calculated. And the last schedule, it's on the next page, page 68. Schedule of grant contracts. So this is a list of all the current contracts the commission has in place. And so it shows, how much the grant was, what was spent during the fiscal year, what's been spent to date, and then any remaining balance that would be budgeted for the next fiscal year. And last 2 things I'll point out, flipping over a few pages to page 75. This is the schedule of expenditures of federal awards. This shows all the various different federal grant programs that the commission expended during the year. So it lists the program and how much was spent on each program. In the big, so total 26.9 million. Of course, the big chunk of that is the body program of 24.9 million. This schedule is one that a lot of funders like to look at. And then the last thing is on page 77 is a schedule of findings and question costs. This just basically summarizes the audit results. So again, unmodified opinion on the financial statements, no internal control or federal award issues. This talks about the major program that was audited for uniform guidance, which of course was the body program. And there was no financial statement findings or federal award findings or question cost. That's it. But again, it was a clean audit.
As usual, well done.
Yeah, and congratulations
Yeah.
to the staff, the new finance director doing a great job right off the bat. So it's really wonderful. I'm sure it was not an easy task. All right, moving on then.
Take action on that one.
Oh, we have to take action. Yes,
Agenda.
I'm sorry. We have a motion to recommend the agenda for the board here.
Yeah, so we want to make a motion, the Finance Executive Committee recommends approval of the FY 24 financial. Is that what can I ask for? Yeah, I'll make that motion. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Chair outside. Unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
I do have a question though, before we move on to the next, can we do that?
Yeah.
It's more of a process question. And since we have our auditor here. Is there a way that we can start looking at making AP disbursement other than physical checks? I mean, we're pushing out a bunch of checks that require multiple signatures. I'm pretty sure this is of this where we are in the world and time. Is there a way we can automate that in some way? And it just seems to me to be super laborious to generate checks, rotate them, go through, have 2 signatures on them. There's got to be an easier way to do that. I don't know if that impacts the auditing side of things. I suspect not.
No, I mean, it wouldn't change, it wouldn't change the audit overall. Now, we would, certainly look at, if you change your process on how you do a disbursement, we'll consider that when we're doing the audit, but.
It just seems that there's a lot of staff time that could be reduced if we did some sort of way where we're doing, online digital payments, and then as the chair, as the treasurer, instead of signing checks, then I would just sign a one single document that's reviews all the checks instead of physically signing how many checks going through, kind of like we do for the VADI, right? On that, it just seems to me that this would be a streamlined version of it, and to do that, I just wanted to kind of throw that out. Laura and I have been talking about it, and I figured this is a good place to table that. It just seems a little old school, and there may be an actually more efficient and better way of doing this. So there you go. That's my thinking.
Any thoughts? I mean, it seems like there probably is some better ways to do it, but I don't know.
Just from a staff perspective, my understanding is that at some point, some financial policies and procedures were put in place. And that our process right now is dictated by these policies and procedures. And that they need to be reviewed in full on not just accounts payable checks, but probably a bunch of other tasks that are being done, including how things are being categorized between chart account codes and just a menagerie of things in that. So we do have a plan to look at policies and procedures and do a policy and procedure audit across the board as part of our 5-year strategic plan. This maybe should be moved up and maybe looked at independently because of the time involved. We do have in place through QuickBooks the ability to do online bill pay, which would eliminate the need for checks to be printed and signed. And in doing so, Keith is correct. We could do an accounts payable report, make it digital, send it around by what the cash outlay would be, have eyes on all the expenses, sign off on the maybe 1-page summary report that all are approved in one quick twice a month process. And then those bills could be paid on an online. So there is a way to do it currently.
But we need to change our policy.
And we have that on our list of coming up in either the February or the April Finance Executive Committee meeting to be looking at that so that we can make that change in advance of next fiscal year.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
Am I correct in saying that? That was on the list?
That's my recollection.
Yes,
of our agenda
yes.
items, yes.
And I mean, we've certainly seen places move away from writing as many checks as they used to and using things like bill pay. One of the things you and I were talking about,
Yeah.
they use that. Doing EFTs, ACH type transactions. We've seen a lot of more on the government side, but using P cards. And like I have some that they only write a check if they have to, only if like the vendor won't take the check, won't take
Well, you just noted, I think the biggest struggle is not internally, it'll be on the vendor.
Right, yeah, exactly. You gotta look at your vendors and see what they will accept, but yeah, definitely the trend seems to be more either P card or some type of, or bill pay or some type of electronic.
Very rarely see a check other than here.
Yeah. A lot of my vendors let me pay by credit card, which is great.
Right, yeah.
Just turn out points, so.
Right, yeah. Well, that's the nice thing about the P cards.
Couple
'cause you
million
get
miles
rebates.
built up,
Right, yeah.
So where are we going? Well, thank you. I just wanted
Yeah.
a table. I don't think we've ever talked about it, and as long as it's on the to-do list, I'm good with it. I think it will be better use of staff of everybody's time, and we can focus on something else.
Yeah,
Cool.
you just want to make sure you still have controls in place over over those processes.
You'll tell us when we're not.
Yeah.
After.
Before-
We want them to look at it ahead
Yeah,
of
we
time.
can, we're
Quality.
we're always happy. I mean, whenever they have questions or whatever, I mean, we're happy to look at the policy and say, oh, wait a second, that doesn't look good. We'd rather address it on the front end and the back end so that this stays.
It's part of why I tabled it. right
Yeah.
now. Super. Thank you.
Great. Well, we now need to move into closed session, so you can go into the other room, and there's dinner, so help yourself to dinner in there. We'll have to read the closed session motions that are included in the packet to go in and out, and then we'll meet you in there. So the meeting is over.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Do we, just a question on this motion, is this actually should say the commission or the executive committee?
It should say the executive committee, and now that you're drawing my attention to that, I wonder if I didn't replace a code either. Because David normally does the form and I did it myself.
Yeah, A3 sounds like personnel. Let me look at,
No,
is it?
that's the right one. Yeah, it's the right one. See, because I put to discuss TJPDC office space. Okay.
So when I make the motion, I'm just gonna say the executive
Yes.
committee.
Good catch, thank you.
So can I do that? You want me to do that?
Yes, I'm gonna take roll call just before we go into it. Michael Payne,
Here.
Tony O'Brien, Keith Smith. Thank you.
I, Keith Smith move that the executive committee for the planning district commission be conveyed to closed session pursuant, is that correct?
Is correct.
Pursuant to the exception found in section 2.2-3711 A3 of the Code of Virginia to discuss Thomas Jefferson Planning District Commission office space. Motion second by.
Second.
Okay, motion's been made by Mr. Smith, seconded by Mr. Payne. All those in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, the motion passes.
So this is proof Smith Connect.
Okay, we are recording.
I, Keith Smith, moves that the executive committee for the Thomas Jefferson Planning District Commission exit closed session. Motion second by. Second.
Motion's been made by Mr. Smith and seconded by Mr. Payne. All those in favor?
Roll call.
Roll call. Michael Payne,
Yes.
Tony O'Brien,
Yes.
Keith Smith,
Aye.
motion passes. And the final motion is on the back.
I, Keith Smith, move that the executive committee for the Thomas Jefferson Planning District Commission certify that to the best of its knowledge, each member's knowledge, only public business matter lawfully accepted from the open meeting requirements of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act and identified as the motion to authorize the closed session were heard, discussed to or considered in closed session. Second.
Motion's made by Mr. Smith and seconded by Mr. Payne. We roll call for this as well.
Yep,
too.
Michael Payne,
Yes.
Tony O'Brien,
Yes.
Keith
Yep.
Smith.
Before we exit, you have one, before we adjourn. You have one question since we talked about the lease improvements. So page 35. You list as an asset leased building. What, that's confusing to me. You're listing the liability of the leased building based on the,
It's a
All right.
gas.
It's a new
gas
Gatsby rule that started last
68, I
year.
think,
okay.
actually 20 year before.
So you,
Last year was the first year they did it for us.
so, but if we're down to 1 year, right?
Yes,
And we show 392,000 as the asset component of it. Wouldn't you think that the lease building component would be down to like about 100,000 if that's the remainder of our lease?
the balance that was put in as the original value of the asset was after 2 years of lease.
Okay,
So it wasn't the actual starting balance of the total
So it's only
5 year.
but even if it's only 3 years,
Yeah.
wouldn't the remainder of the difference between the two? Because right now the difference is
It should be 15 months.
15 months and
It's
I'm reading it as.
12 months for this current year and 3 months of fiscal year 26.
Right.
So only the 26 portion is a long-term asset, the rest is in the short-term liability.
Asset, okay. Cause that would be, what, 96,000 plus another 40,000 or something like that. Roughly, so 130
30, let's say.
It should just be 15 months.
15 months, okay, so yeah, right around 50,000. Be the balance, right?
Of the, what's remaining rent
What's remaining.
payments or the amortization of the lease.
What is the difference between the asset versus the accumulated depreciation of the lease building?
Can you tell me what page you're on?
Page 35.
Funny, I know that you do that.
We wanna
We want to adjourn
adjourn and then you'll.
Okay.
Yep, and then we can discuss.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Motion to adjourn.
I'm gonna make a motion.
Second. Okay, motion's been made by Mr. Smith, seconded by Mr. Payne. All those in favor?
Aye.
Chair
My
votes
bladder
aye.
thanks you.
All right, thank you.